We continue now at the top of Daf Samech Dalit Amid Beis and Meseches Kiddushin. This is Kiddushin Daf 64b. This daf is sponsored by Sean Kishani. Thank you for your sponsorship. If you would like to sponsor an Amid or a daf, please see the description box below and see the description box below to see how you can support this channel. On the previous Amid, we were discussing the difference between the Mishnah and the Brisa. In the Mishnah, it says, let's say you have a situation where at the time of his death, the husband says that the woman is going to be patur from Yibum. Let's say he says, for example, that he has children, so then he is believed. But if he says that his wife is going to be obligated in Yibum, let's say he says that he has brothers, so then he is not believed. And so Abai explains that the explanation of the Mishnah is, there was a chazaka already at the time of the marriage that she was not obligated in Yibum. So therefore, if he goes against the chazaka and he says that she is obligated in Yibum, that's why we don't believe him. But as long as he stays consistent with the chazaka and says she's not obligated in Yibum, so then he is believed. Now in the Brisa's case, the husband at the beginning of the marriage, he says that she's not obligated in Yibum, and then he changes his mind towards the end of the marriage at the time of his death, and he says she is obligated in Yibum. And so for the Brisa, Abaye explains that the Brisa is talking about a situation, de muchzak lon ba'achi v'lo muchzak lon b'vni. There's a chazaka that there are brothers, but there's no chazaka that there are children, meaning to say there's a general presumption that she is obligated in Yibum. And so therefore, when he's saying at the beginning of the marriage that she's not obligated in Yibum, he's going against that chazaka. However, however, we say mali l'shakar, we say why should he lie? We actually believe him at the outset, and we say that she's not obligated in Yibum, as he is saying, because my kamar, because what are you going to say? Lemifter miyavam, you're going to say the reason why he's saying this is in order to make her pater from doing Yibum, but motzi amar, but he's able to say a different thing. He can say patar nalach begita, he'll just say that when he gets close to the time of death, he'll give her a get, and in that fashion, by giving her a get, so she won't be chayav in Yibum anyway. In other words, he's believed because he has a very simple way to avoid her being obligated in Yibum, and so therefore when he says at the outset of the marriage that she's not obligated in Yibum, so he is believed in that regard. Now the question is, at the time of his death, he now changes, and he says she actually is obligated in Yibum, even though at the beginning of the marriage he said she is not. Now he's changing his mind, and that's a machlokas Rebbe and Rabbi Nosson. Rebbe holds mali l'shakar ki edim. If he had a mali l'shakar at the beginning, and he said that she was not obligated in Yibum, that's as if Edim said, ki edim dummy, that's as if Edim said that she's not obligated in Yibum. V'yasu Edim akri chazaka, and the Edim come, they actually uproot the chazaka, they uproot that original presumption, and we say that it's as if we have real Edus that she's not chayiv in Yibum, and so now later at the time of his death he's saying she is. We don't believe him according to Rebbe. Rabbi Nosson Savra, but Rabbi Nosson holds mali l'shakar. If he has a mali l'shakar, that why should he lie? And therefore we believe him at the beginning of the marriage that she's not obligated in Yibum. But that's just ki chazaka dummy. That's not like Edim. It's just like a chazaka. It's like one chazaka against another chazaka. There's a presumption she was chayiv in Yibum. He's creating a mali l'shakar chazaka that she's not chayiv in Yibum. And so therefore they essentially cancel out lo asi chazaka v'akra chazaka lagamri. A chazaka doesn't come and totally uproot the original chazaka. And that's why when he says at the time of death, even if he says at the time of death that she is actually obligated in Yibum, so that really that original chazaka that she was obligated never really went away, and that's why he is believed. And Rashi explains the muchzak lan hai gavra ba'achi, again, there is a chazak in the brayso, so the person did have brothers, veloshi yesh edim b'davar. Rashi notes, it's not that they're edim, that there were brothers, it's just a chazaka. El chazaka b'alma, it's just a presumption. Kach shamanu olav kodem kiddushin, that's what we heard before kiddushin. We heard that there's an obligation of yibum. V'chiyomer v'shas kiddushin, now when he says at the time of kiddushin, yeshli bonim, that I have children, v'ein liachin, and I don't have brothers, so therefore he's saying now that she's not obligated in yibum. Ilav the hadar be b'shas misa, if not for the fact that he retracted that at the time of death, we actually would believe him against the chazaka. Because we would use a mali l'shakir. Why should he lie? Maika Amar, and so then the Gemara said, well, why should we maybe not believe him? What is this? What's the benefit of him saying that she's not obligated in Yibum? Who, if the whole point is he's trying to pater from the brother-in-law from the Yibum, to Asi, so Matzi Amar la patarna lach begita. there's another way he could have done that. He can just say to her that I'm going to give you a get mechayim samuch l'misasi while I'm alive, close to my death. So again, he has this mali l'shaker. He's believed at the time of the marriage to say that she's not obligated in ibum, but now he's retracting at the time of death and saying she is. That's the machlokas between Rebbe and Rabbi Nosson. Rebbe savar mali l'shaker d'shas kiddushin kilu bo edim b'dover zeh dummy. When you have a mali l'shaker, that's like edim. The chazaka is gone. Again, originally we had a presumption he had brothers and no children, but that chazaka is gone now. Now she has a chazaka. She doesn't have to do ibum. Now he wants to come along and undo that, so he's not able to do that. Rabbi Nosson holds that again, when we talk about a mali l'shaker, it's just a chazaka. It never really uproots completely the first chazaka. The chazak of why should he lie doesn't uproot the original chazaka that she's chayiv and yibam to have a koiba kodem kiddushin. That's what she had again before the kiddushin. It's not going to undo what he says at the time of death. When he says at the time of death she's obligated in yibam, she will in fact be obligated in yibam. But nevertheless, if he doesn't retract and if he stays with the mali l'shaker, he stays and says she's not chayiv and yibam, have a hasharia li'alma, she actually would be permitted to marry anyone. Because granted, one chazaka doesn't totally uproot the first chazaka, but it does lessen that first chazaka. As long as he doesn't contradict what he said originally, he is believed, a person's not going to sin without any benefit to himself. If he did in fact have brothers, he certainly would retract at the time of his death. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, HaMekadesh es bito stam. Let's say a person gives away his daughter in Kiddushin, but stam, he doesn't say which daughter he is referring to. As Rashi says, HaMekadesh es bito stam, biti mekudeshes lach, my daughter is mekudeshes to you. V'lo pirish ezemihem, he doesn't explain which daughter. So the Mishnah says, ein habogros bechlal, so the adult girls, they're not counted at all, because they can marry anyone. There certainly was no Kiddushin with the adult girls, because that's not within his power. As Rashi says, ein habogeres bechlal, if you have the bogeris, an adult girl, she's mutter to anyone. She doesn't need a get. She's not even in the authority of the father. He's not able to give her away in Kiddushin. And the Mishnah continues, let's say a person has two sets of daughters, mishtei nashim, from two wives. V'yomer, and he says, Kidashti es biti hagedola, he says, I gave away to Kiddushin my eldest daughter. V'eni odei, and I don't know, im gedola shebegedolos, is it the oldest of the oldest set? O gedola shebektanos, or maybe it's the oldest of the youngest set? O ketana shebegedolos, or maybe it's the youngest of the oldest set? She gedola min hagedolos shebektanos, she's older than even the oldest one of the youngest set. So in this case, we have no idea which girl he's referring to. The halach is, according to Rabbi Meir, kulan asuros, all of his daughters are usur, chutz min haketana shebeketanos, except for the youngest of the youngest set of girls. Divrei Rabbi Meir, that's the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir essentially is strict. Rabbi Yossi says, kulan mutaros, on the contrary, everybody is mutter, chutz min hagedola shebegedolos, except for the oldest of the oldest. We say, we're lenient over here, and we say he must have been referring to the oldest daughter of the oldest set. And the Mishnah says in the other direction as well, Kidashti es biti haketana. Let's say he says, I gave away my youngest daughter to Kiddushin, V'eni odeya, and I don't know, im ketana shebektanos, is it the youngest of the youngest set, or ketana shebegedolos, or the youngest of the older set, or gedola shebektanos, or maybe it's the oldest of the younger set, she ketana mina ketana shebegedolos, because she is younger than the youngest one of the older set. So again, kulan asuros chutz min hagedola shebegedolos, divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says they are all usur except for the oldest of the oldest set. Rabbi Yossi is the one that's lenient. Rabbi Yossi says kulan mutaros, they're all mutter chutz min haketana shebeketanos, except for the youngest of the youngest set. And the Gemara says haketanos bechlal. The Gemara says that it sounds like if a person says, I gave away my daughter to Kiddushin, I don't know which one, so then the girls who are not adults, they are going to be included in that, and we'd have a real suffix that there might be a Kiddushin. And so the Gemara says, Shamat mina, but should we see from this, Kiddushin shein mesurim labiyah, have a Kiddushin, that if you have a Kiddushin which cannot lead to an act of relations, because over here we have no idea which girl it is, apparently we see from the Mishnah, that is a Kiddushin. And the Gemara says not necessarily, we don't necessarily see that from our Mishnah. And here what are we talking about? In the first case of the Mishnah, there's actually only two daughters. There's one that's an adult and one that's a minor, and the Mishnah is saying we can exclude the adult. We know that it's the katana, we know that it's the minor. But the Gemara asks about bogros katani, but it says it in plural. It says the adult daughters. Sounds like there are many adult daughters, and the same should be true with the minor daughters. There should be many of them. And so the Gemara says, no, my bogros, what does it mean? What does it mean bogros? It just means bogros dialma. It just means adult daughters in general, but this particular person only has one adult daughter. And the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, pshita, then it's so obvious. Of course it's not referring to the adult daughter. Bogros maya videtayu. How would it ever refer to the adult daughters? That wouldn't make any sense. And the Gemara says, Hacham Mayaskina, no, here the case is, the Shavise Shliach, that what actually happened was his adult daughter designated him as a Shliach to actually be Makadisher. So there is a possibility that it was her. Mahu Detema, now what might you have said, Ki Makabal Kiddushay Adaita Didaka Makabal? Maybe he was accepting the Kiddushin for her. Kamash Malon, so that's what the Mishnah is teaching us. Lo Shavik Inish Midi De Isle Hanam Minei, a person is not going to abandon something where he gets the benefit. By his daughter that's a minor, he actually receives the Kiddushin. He gets to keep the money for himself. V'yavid Midi De Lesle Hanam Minei. He's not going to go ahead and give away the oldest daughter where he doesn't get any benefits. But the Gemara continues, Milo Askinon de Amrle Kiddushay Lach. But aren't we also dealing with a case? The possibility is that the oldest daughter actually said you could keep the Kiddushin. Why should we say that the case only is where the daughter is the one that's going to keep that Kiddushin? But the Gemara says even if that's the case, Afilu Hachi, nevertheless, Lo Shavik Inish Mitzvah Deram Yoleh. A person is not going to abandon a mitzvah that's upon him. He has a mitzvah to marry off his daughter who is a minor. V'yavid Mitzvah de Lo Ram Yoleh, and instead do a mitzvah that's not something that's upon him with a daughter that's an adult. And so therefore we know that this was referring to the daughter that is a minor. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, Misha Yeshlo Shtei Kitei Banos. Again, somebody has two sets of daughters, and the Mishnah had two cases. The Mishnah had a situation where he had given away to Kiddushin the oldest daughter, and there was a machlokes, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Meir was strict and Rabbi Yossi was lenient. And then the same thing by the youngest daughter. Again, Rabbi Meir was strict and Rabbi Yossi was lenient. And the Gemara says with tzricha, we need to have the machlokes by both cases. The Iyashmin and Kamaisa, because if we only had the first case, the case of the oldest daughter, Bahach Kama Rabbi Meir, there Rabbi Meir is strict. The Kevon Dika Zutra Mina, because since there's somebody younger than this particular girl, Zutra Mina Lahach Gedola Karila. So this one's called an older sister, an older daughter. Avol Bahai Mamodi Leila Rabbi Yossi, but in the other case of the youngest daughter, maybe Rabbi Meir would agree with Rabbi Yossi, he'd be lenient. The Ketana Lahach Ketana Dekulu Karila, because if you're younger to anyone, you're considered to be a Ketana, you're considered to be the younger one. And you can say the other way around as well. V'yitmar Baha, if we only had that case of the younger one, Baha Kamar Rabbi Yossi, maybe only over there Rabbi Yossi is lenient. Avol Bahachim Mamodi Leila Rabbi Meir, but maybe in the case of the oldest daughter, Rabbi Yossi would admit to Rabbi Meir, and Rabbi Yossi would be strict. And so therefore, tzricha, that's why we need both cases. And the Gemara continues, L'meimra de Rabbi Meir savar machis inish nafshei l'sveika. Does our Mishnah mean to say that Rabbi Meir, he's the one that holds that a person would put himself into a situation of doubt? Rabbi Meir is strict over here and says we really have no idea which daughter he's referring to. For Rabbi Yossi savar, and that Rabbi Yossi holds in general, lo machis inish l'sveika, that a person doesn't put himself into a situation of doubt, and therefore we can be sure that he was either referring to the actual oldest daughter or the actual youngest daughter. But that's not true. We actually have an example where it's the exact opposite. Rabbi Yossi is the one that is strict, and Rabbi Meir is the one that is lenient. Titnan, as we learned in the Mishnah in Nedarim, Hanodr at Pesach, let's say somebody takes a neder, he's forbidding wine to himself until Pesach, Asr ad sheyagia, so it's asr to have the wine until Pesach arrives. Ad sheyehei Pesach, let's say the way it's phrased is ad sheyehei Pesach, so asr ad sheyetze, so then it's going to be asr all the way until Pesach ends, all the way through the end of Pesach, the neder will be enforced. What if he uses the language ad pnei Pesach? So there we have a machlokas tanoim. Rabbi Meir Omer asr ad sheyagia, Rabbi Meir says it's only asr until Pesach arrives. Rabbi Meir here is the lenient one. Rabbi Yossi Omer ad sheyetze, and Rabbi Yossi says it's all the way through the end of Pesach, he's the strict one. Apparently Rabbi Yossi is the one that's saying that a person would enter himself into a situation of doubt. It's the exact opposite of what we see in the Mishnah. And the Gemara answers, Amar Rabbi Chanina bar Avdimi, Amar Rav Chanina bar Avdimi says that Rav says Muchlefes Hashita, just switch around the Shitas over here, meaning to say even though Rabbi Meir here seems to be lenient and Rabbi Yossi is strict, it's actually the other way around. Switch it around, that Rabbi Meir, like our Mishnah, Rabbi Meir is strict and Rabbi Yossi is the one that is lenient. V'atanyan, we have a brisa that supports this as well. Zeh HaKlal, this is the rule. Kol shezmano kavu, if it's a set time. V'yamar ad penei, and the language of ad penei is used. Rabbi Meir omer ad sheyetze, Rabbi Meir says it's until it ends, through the end of it. Rabbi Meir again is the strict one. Rabbi Yossi omer ad sheyagia, Rabbi Yossi says it's until that time arrives. And the Gemara continues, Amar Abaya, Abaya says, Machlokis b'shtei kitei bonus. The whole machlokis in the Mishnah is when you have two sets of daughters, again from two different wives. Avol bekas achas, but let's say you have one set of daughters, and he says the oldest or the youngest, so there, divrei hakol gedola mamish ketana mamish, everybody agrees you could be lenient. If it's the oldest daughter, it means the oldest daughter, the youngest daughter means the youngest daughter, and emtsoyis b'shma karila, a middle daughter would be called by her name. And the Gemara says, is that really the case? Ravada bar Masna le Abaya. Ravada bar Masna says to Abaya, Elamayata, but according to that, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Samech Hey Amud Aleph.